Hi, I'm Susan. Welcome to my home and studio at Windy Acre Cottage. It's a 100-year-old craftsman cottage where I love to paint and garden and entertain and care for all my wonderful fur babies, both those that are adopted and all the little fosters. It's also my home base for many fun adventures of the art, history, and gardening kind. Hey, welcome back. I'm Susan, and this is the Brilliant Strokes series of classes. We're learning how to paint in 5 steps, and I'm putting a special emphasis on underpaintings, which is part of the painting process that people don't really pay a lot of attention to, but can really make or break your painting. So in week 1, we did a burnt sienna underpainting, just very light, very watery, just to knock off that white sheen of the canvas so that it was more of a mid-tone. And then in week number 2, we went ahead and blocked in our basic shapes, we darkened our darks, and we lightened our lights by taking a wet paper towel and pulling out the lights. So we basically had a monochromatic burnt sienna painting before we ever put any color on top of that. Now the really fun part starts today in week 3, where we're going to need a color wheel. So if you don't have your color wheel memorized, you need to go online and just look up the color wheel and print that off, or go ahead and memorize it. Typically a color wheel has 12 different colors on it, and it is in a circle, so it mimics a clock. And I typically put the red at 12 o'clock, the yellow at 4 o'clock, and the blue at 8 o'clock. And then that way, when you do that, you can always see it the same way in your head. Not only do you need to know the 3 primary colors, but you also need to memorize the 3 secondary colors and their relationship to the primary colors. So you need to know that purple or violet is halfway between red and blue, green is halfway between blue and yellow, and orange is halfway between yellow and red. The other thing you're going to need to know is what is the complement to that color. And that's just a fancy word for saying what is the opposite of that color. So when you have red, the opposite is green. And the way you know that is because what is red? It's red. That's all it is, a primary color. What is green? Green is everything that is not red. That's why it's a complement. So it's blue and yellow mixed together. Yellow, what is the complement to yellow? It's whatever yellow is not. Well, what is yellow not? It's not red or blue. So if you put those together, you have violet or purple. So that would be the complement, or the color that's directly opposite of your yellow. So that little bit of color theory is what you're going to need to move forward in this class today. And we're going to get started by blocking in the basic shape. Now, normally blocking in a basic shape is step number 2. And if you wanted to go ahead and do a really light, watery burnt sienna underpainting, you could, but you don't have to in this stage. We're going to do step number 2 first and step number 1 second. So step number 2, the block in, is where we're going to start. And we're going to paint these 2 apples that are on a little dish towel. Now I'm going to fold my reference photo in half, open it up, fold it in half the other direction, open it up, and now I have crosshairs on my reference photo. So I can look at my canvas, go about halfway down and throw a line there, halfway across, throw a line there. Now you can use a regular pencil for this. I like to use a soft pastel pencil in a light blue. And the reason why I do that is because it really just disappears in the paint when we put the paint on top. So I'm going to block in just my basic shapes. So I can see here that my apple goes across the halfway mark. It goes down, not quite half. It goes over, not quite half. and comes back down around. So there's one apple. And then about on that line, and then it's yellow in part of it, the rest is a shadow. And then just right of that midpoint line is where the next apple begins. That's what we'll do up here. A leaf. We've got the towel. You've got cast shadow. We've got cast shadow here. We've got some cast shadow in here. Looks like we might even have like a little leaf here. Some cast shadow this way. All right, so there I have, oh, and then we've also got shadow on this apple going this way. So now we have the basic shapes already on our canvas, but we don't have any paint. We've got to move now to the underpainting. Now what we're going to do is, instead of doing the burnt sienna, which is what we normally do, we're going to dial in a color in every shape to be our underpainting. So it's not going to be one color everywhere, it's going to be a different color in every shape. Now every shape is not every object. For example, the tea towel that's underneath the apples, you'll notice how they make different shapes as it's folded. Some of those are in light and some of those are in shadow. We're going to dial this either warmer or cooler depending on where the light is falling on the objects. And so when you look, where's our light coming from? When you look at your reference, you can tell the light is actually shining from left to right. And we know that because we've got a warm light on the left side of both of those apples, and we've got a cool cast shadow off to the right. So if the apple, let's go with the center one, and you see that it's a little yellow right in here, which is very warm, and then it's cooler over in the shadow in the red. So if I am on red and I want to go cooler, I can either put in this kind of a pinky purpley color, or I can put in a violet color, because yellow is our warmest primary, blue is our coolest primary. So if we're going to go take the local color of what the object is and bump it up a little warmer, we're going to take it a little bit closer to yellow. And if we're going to go a little cooler, we're going to dial it down closer to blue. And if that doesn't make sense right now, don't worry about it. Hang with me and it'll start making sense as we paint. So let me grab my paints. And I'm looking at this apple, and even though I said it was yellow here, it is not this, you know, cad yellow medium. It's much cooler than that. But because it's in a warm light, we're going to go ahead and make that really, really, really warm. And if you think about it, this is the underpainting. We're actually going to paint on top of this. So you don't really have to worry about this not being the exact color of what you see. This is the underpainting. So is there anything else that needs to have a yellow light that is warm? Okay, right up in here, I see some yellow in the warm. Down here near the leaf. There's a couple of other places. Warm. And I think that's the only place I see that. So that same apple turns red as it goes into the shadow. So I need to paint it red, but I'm wanting to dial it down cooler. So if I have red and I'm wanting it to go toward blue to make it cooler, it would be somewhere in the purple color, violet color. So I'm going to take some red, mix it with a little blue, and that will be the underpainting for this side. I also have a red apple over here that has a shadow side. So that same color is going to go right here into this shape right here. We also have a little shadow here. Now we also have some shadow on the apple right here, but you know what? It's not in the red area, it's in the yellow area. So now I have to take yellow and make it cooler. So how do you make yellow cooler? We have to go toward blue. So I need to make it either a limey green or more of a green to be a cool underpainting to represent yellow. I'm gonna take a little yellow paint, a little blue paint, and if I have other yellows that are in shadow, it'll go here. Any other yellow in shadow, I don't see it. Could be a little bit in there, but not much. Okay. This apple in the back is red in light. So if it's red and it's in a warm light, we need to bump it up a notch to make it a little more warm. So we have to put a little yellow in it. So that's going to bring it to orange. So I'm going to grab my yellow, mix a little red with it. Do I have any more reds in light? Maybe a little bit here. Maybe a little bit here. Okay. Now I'm looking at the white cloth. In shadow, it's going to be more blue. Because blue is cool. Might even put a little red in there. So where are my shadows? Here. Got a cast shadow going here. Got a cast shadow going here. We've got white in the cloth that's in the light. So I'm going to take white and warm it up with a little yellow. Okay, I've got a green leaf up here in shadow. So how do I take green a little cooler? We go closer to the blue. So I'm going to add some blue to my green. And put that leaf in shadow. That's almost too green. I'm going to add a little more blue to that. But if you look over here, this leaf is in light, in warm light. So we're going to plump it up a notch and put in kind of a limey yellow color. Now the only thing we have left is the table, and it's kind of a warm wood tone, which is kind of a brown. So I think what I'm going to do with that is warm it up even more and put some of this orange in there, especially down here where it definitely is in the light. It looks like it could be in the light up in this corner. And maybe even over here in this corner. But then there's a little bit of a cast shadow going on up here where it's cooler. So I'm going to go back and grab some of this blue and throw that little cast shadow up here in a cool color. There's also a cast shadow from this leaf, and I'm going to make it a darker blue than the other one. So cast shadow, cast shadow, cast shadow. All right. So what we've got here is the underpainting and the blocking of the basic shapes, only we did them backwards. Instead of doing the underpainting first, we did the blocking of the basic shape first using a blue pastel pencil, and you're welcome to use just a regular number 2 pencil if you like. And then we went back in with our paints and went into every shape that was warm, took the local color and plumped it up a notch or 2 on that color wheel and painted that as our underpainting. We took every shape that was in shadow and we dialed it down toward blue so that we were going with the local color, whatever it happened to be, with another notch or 2 toward that cool blue. So now we've got this going on, as our painting with the underpainting, it needs to dry completely before we go on to the next step. So we're going to take a break here. I'm going to grab a blow dryer and dry this and then come back to it. If you want to stop the video at this point, you're welcome to just go and let it dry natural and come back the next day or whenever you want to pick back up again. But we don't want these colors to mix with our other colors we're going to put on top because we don't want to make mud out of them. So go ahead and get that fully dry and then join me back here. So we're back, and I used a blow dryer to dry this just for time's sake. But keep in mind that acrylic paint is flammable, so if you decide to use a blow dryer, keep it on the coolest setting, keep that air moving, and don't let it overheat in one area. We don't want to have any kind of fire catastrophes from our painting, so just be really careful when you do that. So now we have this beautiful, almost abstract painting, but just looking at it this way, you can already tell where the light is and where the shadow is because of the warm light areas and the dark cool areas. So now we move to step number 3. And step number 3 is to scrub in your basic color, or what's called the local color. So as I'm looking at my picture, I'm going to try to match the color and go ahead and scrub that in. So if I was looking at the table that's behind there, it's kind of a wood grain. I'm going to mix up an orange. Using yellow and red. I have to add a little bit of blue to bring it down to a brown. And then I match it, and look, it's the right color. So we will go ahead and throw that color in there. Over here in this corner, up here in this corner. And you don't have to cover the underpainting completely. We want to leave a little air between the strokes so that you can see that beautiful orange coming through. And you can scrub it in if you want to, but I like using individual strokes and not covering it completely. Okay. Clean that brush. Now I'm going to come back and paint the white cloth. And I'm going to take a little white, maybe a little yellow, a little blue. We're going to keep it mostly white, but not completely. We want to bring that down just a little bit. We're going to let some of that yellow show through that we put on in the underpainting.
Got this nice little highlight going on.
Whoops, I got some red in that, but never fear. Wipe it off. We can also paint over it. And honestly, that white is a lot darker than that. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it, a little bit of red. So we're kind of making a bluish lavender color. And it actually has more red in it than that. Much better. And now I'm going to make the white in shadow. And what will throw you off is that white in shadow can be darker than black in sunlight. So we're gonna mix a pretty dark color to be our white in shadow. And there's actually different values of shadow going on, but I'm gonna take some blue, maybe a little red. It's even darker than that. So I'm even throwing a little black just to get that value really down there. And right here, it's really dark. Right here, it's really dark. Over in here, it's really dark. And then these others, I'm gonna add a little yellow because it's gonna neutralize it a little bit. If you put in 2-inch yellow, it'll be green. We don't want it green, so we're gonna have to add a little red. And maybe a little more blue. Maybe a little white to brighten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to add some white to that because we've got a lighter shadow. It's still in the shadow, but it's lighter. So it kind of goes on top of here.
Goes across here. Down under here. It's kind of a transitional color in here. Up in here.
A little of what we call a penumbral shadow. It's kind of the lighter shadow that's around a shadow and it's peeping out in places. Okay, clean that brush really good. Let's go into our apple. Now, even though our apple right here in the center is kind of yellowy, it's really not that chromatic. It's more neutral. So I'm gonna add some yellow and a little white to our table color, that orangey color. I'll mix my color and see if it's even close. Might even put that same color on top of the other yellow that's in light.
Okay.
Now we want to put our red in. And you'll notice that right before it goes into the shadow, that's where it looks the most red. So I may even take some straight red, not much of it though, and put that here around the edge. Maybe blend it into that yellow a little bit. Do the same thing over here. Actually, this one is more red all the way around, so we'll just go and throw that red in there. Make it a little deeper red right before it goes into shadow. And then we're going to take that red with just the tiniest bit of blue, so that it's still red, but a little bit on the cool side. And paint the rest of that apple. And also the one over here. And because it blends, we're just going to kind of blend that into that other color. Also, I don't want to muddy up my colors, so I'm going to clean my brush a little bit more than I normally do. Take some red, a little yellow. Pop it over here in the light. Also, we're going to warm that up and lighten that up a little bit. And I also need to warm this up and lighten it as it comes into the light. And then one thing you need to look at is where the light hits the apple the most intensely, it actually drowns out the color. It doesn't warm it up, it makes it white. And white is a searing cold color. White and black are our coldest colors. So I'm gonna reserve this perfect white, neat, straight from the tube, and add that highlight here. Looks like there's a little bit of a highlight over here, and that might be a little too white. But this one's not. Looks like there might even be some around the edge here. Okay. Clean that brush. Going to make that green now. And I'm going to use black and yellow to make green. I know most people think you use blue and yellow, but I like to do black and yellow to make this gorgeous green here. also make the dark green under here. Clean that really good. Add our yellow or green down here. Now it again has some light hitting it that makes it just drowns out the color. It looks like it's along the center line. Also where it folds. We've got kind of a greenish brown going on in here in this little hole, and a very dark center. It may be a little too dark, but yeah, it is too dark. Let me lighten it up a little bit. Dark as well. This one actually gets darker as it comes over here in the shadow. This one it gets a little lighter over in the shadow. It's got some light reflecting off the apple behind it. So we'll take a little bit lighter red and let it have a little bit of a reflective look to it. Never be afraid to get your fingers dirty. And so we have covered our canvas for the second time, except for that little piece up here. And that's where we have to have brown with a lot of blue in it. That's our table in shadow right there. Okay. So at this point, we have covered our canvas for the second time. The first time was with the underpainting, and the second time is with our basic colors. So now we have to go into step number 4. And step number 4 is what I call the magic stage. And this is where we take our artist toolbox, which is sitting beside every artist, and it's full of all these imaginary, but very real to us, tools that we can use to take this from a pretty picture to a masterpiece. So what can we do? We can lighten a light, we can darken a dark, we can soften some edges, we can sharpen some edges, we can reshape our shapes, we can add a highlight, we can add an accent. And it's typically at this point that I like to walk away from my painting and do something completely different so that I can come back with fresh eyes and see it for what it is. It's like trying to proof a term paper after you've been writing it. You already know in your head what it's supposed to say, and when you read it as if it says what it's supposed to say. But the worst thing in the world is the next morning when you're on the school bus and you look down and you've got a typo in your paper, and you proofed it and you proofed it and you proofed it. But when you have fresh eyes, you see things anew. And so that's what I like to do with my painting, is to leave it alone and then come back. One thing is the acrylic paint is going to darken. That's just a characteristic of acrylic paint. So we might need to go lighter somewhere, but also might need to put in some detail. So just for the purposes here, let me stand back for a second, evaluate, and decide what do I need to do. Now, there's this game you can play where you see two pictures that presumably are identical. But it's a game where someone's gone in and digitally changed 10 things in one of the photos. Imagine that's what we're doing now. This is one photo and this is the other photo. And theoretically, they're supposed to look alike. But what I'm gonna do is back up, look at my photo, look at my painting, look at my photo, and say one of these things is not like the other. And how do I make that one more like this one? So let's take a look and see. The value here is too dark. It just stands right out. So I'm going to mix up a lighter brown and go over it so that it's lighter, but it's still in shadow. Much better. This is actually lighter, so I'm going to add some yellow. And it seems to be going in a direction, like a wood grain. I don't see it quite as much up here, but if I wanted to put some in there, I could. I do see it down here. That's not as nearly pronounced as in my photo, and I was able to just wipe it off because it's still wet. A little bit of a bounce back of light over here. That might have too much white in it. But it's lighter without going warmer. So that's when we add a little white to it. I want there to be a transition color there. And that transition color is typically our most chromatic, so I'm just going to take some straight red. Using very light pressure, just kind of working it around. Same thing over here. I want to reshape this shape right here next to the apple. I kind of went out of the bounds and lost my apple shape. My cast shadows are too blue. They need to be more purple. And then I need to add a little detail. For example, there's kind of a light brown color along the leaf over here. Toss some in there. Looks like there might even be a stem in there. And then if I wanted to put some detail in that cloth, I could. So it looks like there might be a little bit of a line going here. And then at this point, I want to let it rest. At this point, I truly need to have some distance from it and then come back to it with fresh eyes and make a decision about what I need to change. And if I don't need to change anything, it's time to move to step number 5. And step number 5 is what? Do you remember? That's when we simply sign our name. Your painting is never finished until you've signed it. You don't necessarily have to sign it on the front. You're welcome to take a pen and put the name of the painting on the back. Put your name as the artist and the date that you painted it. If you do want to paint it on the front, you take the smallest round brush that you have. You decide what color. That is a contrasting color where you might want to write it. You want to do it in one of the corners so that it doesn't compete with your composition. And it is okay to paint at the top if you want to. I know John Singer Sargent almost always painted his paintings, he signed his paintings at the top. But he was painting portraits, and down near the bottom were these gorgeous details in a woman's dress. And he didn't want to disturb that with his name. So just very slyly, he would just put that name right at the top so that you didn't even notice that it was there. But you want to take your brush, choose the paint, add a lot of water to it to get it to an ink-like consistency. You want to twirl that brush in that inky paint so that you get a nice sharp point, and using your arm so that you don't wiggle and very little pressure, start signing your name. You might have to reload your brush several times, but that's something you're going to want to practice, not on your paintings. I would say painting your name on a painting is as hard as painting the painting to begin with. So it's something that takes a lot of practice. So work on that this week and then come back next week. We got another way how we're going to do our underpaintings I think you're going to like.